Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with Dacre Montgomery from Stranger Things. Dacre, I feel like, when you played Billy back in season three, he was sadly killed off. But did you ever think at that point
Mhm.
you would get the chance to play him again and make this surprise appearance in season four?
Look, I enjoyed working with the Duffers so much, and I had hoped that they would bring me back. I knew from the get-go, joining in season two, that I would only be doing two and three. And I think that's the reason Billy had such a great story arc in season three was they knew they only had me for a couple of seasons. But no, I was super excited, and I had no idea, and I got the call in sort of the early days of the pandemic. I can't remember, late 2019, early 2020. And it's kind of a hilarious story because, obviously I'd spent so many years working on Billy with the Duffers for the show, for seasons two and three and in between. And, I like to do a lot of character prep and development and sort of live in character while I'm working on a character. So I had well and truly thought that I left Billy behind for all obvious reasons. And then the bros called me, at the start of the pandemic and said, look, we'd love to do a scene, mostly to do obviously with Max's storyline. And and then it became quite difficult to leave Australia, obviously during the pandemic, and
Yeah.
come to the US. And they were shooting Sadie's scenes in Albuquerque, and Sean Levy, who was directing that block, messaged me and said, I don't think we're going to be able to get you over here in time because of all of the border restrictions. Can you record your lines for Sadie? And we'll figure out how to shoot your scenes at a later date. And the energy of working with people in person is so important, so I felt for Sadie and I felt frustrated that I couldn't be over there. And then they went off and shot her scenes. And obviously, a couple months later, they rang me and they said, we don't want to try and get you out here. It's too much of a hassle. We'll shoot it in Oz. And at the time, I was in Sydney, but I'm originally from Perth. And I was going to be heading back there. So they decided to shoot the scenes in my hometown. But a soundstage of the size that they needed, or a blue screen stage, didn't exist. So they built one just for the one scene
Wow.
in Western Australia, which was awesome. And I got to work with tons of local crew, and they sent over the wig and the costume and all the prosthetics because obviously we see Billy, post his demise. So there's a lot of remnants of all sorts of things, scratches and cuts and wounds. And I got to shoot in Perth, which was amazing. But the sort of the strangest part of it all was I was on a blue stage. I had an earpiece much like this, but smaller, in my ear with Sadie's lines. Sadie on the day was actually a tennis ball that was positioned next to the camera, and Sean Levy was on an iPad that was positioned next on the other side of the camera. And I had to walk on the spot on a treadmill very slowly. So I sort of had this super emotional scene, and I have a very emotional sort of attachment to Billy, obviously, having done so much work on him that sort of when I knew this was happening, I was determined to sort of spend a bunch of time in the lead up, even though I was in and out of hotel quarantine and all kinds of stuff to move around in Oz, to sort of put everything into this moment, despite being on a blue screen soundstage with a tennis ball and an iPad and an earpiece and no Sadie and no real context, obviously, of what was happening in the rest of the season, which didn't matter too much for
Mm.
me because it's in my mind, I'm like, just do the character work on Billy, know where he's at. And regardless of Vecna and sort of Billy also being a manifestation of Max's guilt, I really just wanted to play Billy for Billy, right? And give the sort of authenticity of the character work in that space because both Vecna and Max know Billy. There's for Max, there's so much core memory there of Billy and who he is. So this sort of materialization of him, it was important for me to play the character properly. Rather than trying to be an offshoot or a representation of someone else's idea of what Billy is post death. Sorry, it's a very long answer to your question, but I'm just sort of spilling it all out.
No, it's great. I mean, what a luxury to have the studio come to you. That's pretty amazing
I
that you
was
could set that up.
It
you know?
was, yeah, I felt very, very lucky. And just to be 5 minutes from where I grew up shooting, Stranger Things was lovely. And it was quite emotional for me.
Mm,
And I think more than anything, just emotional that I couldn't be there for Sadie. She's such a great scene partner. And she's so committed and so focused. And, we did our first scene ever for both of ourselves in Stranger Things together, which was a scene with between Max and Billy early on in season 2. So we had kind of started on the show together and had our first day together. And she was a lot younger at the time, and just already had that intensity and that focus. And it's crazy that this one scene that we shot half in Albuquerque and half in Perth in Western Australia became such a pivotal scene, not just for the show, but also the reception of the show. So many people resonated with that episode, with Dear Billy, and it just became such a huge moment for season 4, which was great, and great to see Max really have her storyline elevated and sort of tent poled and propped up by all the other things that were going on in season 4. Because I remember the Duffers saying that to Sadie during the making of season 3. It was like season 4 is your time.
mm.
So happy to see her have that.
Well, I actually talked to Sadie back when the season had just dropped, the first part of the season. And when she told me that you were not able to be there for that moment, I couldn't believe it because it came together so seamlessly. But on your end,
Mhm.
the connection is so intense in that scene. How does it make it different for you in terms of preparation when you are just acting with a tennis ball?
Mhm.
What different did that require of you?
Well, look, I think it's just any character prep, like this film I'm doing here in New Zealand. I've been prepping my character for 11 months every week with the director, and have worked on one other thing. And I'm solely focused on something when I'm doing it throughout that period. And when I was doing Stranger Things, I didn't work on anything else, like the whole of season 2 and 3 and in between. It's just like Billy becomes all consuming, that becomes your life. So for me, jumping back into that space was fairly straightforward, just because I felt so connected to that, and I felt so connected to Sadie and these characters that we'd created and their connection that we'd created. And Sean Levy, who's directing that app, is such a great director, and he was there kind of walking me through it. But it did feel very intense, despite all of the funny things and being on the other side of the world and stuff. I've spent hundreds of hours working on that character, and bringing that into the space and taking a lot of my own trauma. And, I've spoken a lot about being bullied in high school and how it felt to play the bully, but then humanize the bully, because the
Mm.
bully has stuff going on at home that you don't know about, I don't know about. And that was really where we created, obviously, Billy's his home life that we saw in season 2. But so I felt very connected to it. I felt very emotional. And for me, it's funny, it's like it's a cameo, it's one scene, but it's a culmination of hundreds of hours of work, and really living in character in many ways in Atlanta when we were shooting the other 2 seasons. So that it does feel like someone I'm very close to as a character, Billy.
Yeah. And you do come back, you make a return appearance in the piggyback in the finale, which calls back to
Yes.
the sauna test. Did
Yes.
you revisit that episode from the
Yeah, I
sauna? Did
did.
any good memories come back for that?
Yeah, that was again one of it was my favorite week of shooting season 3. And again, it's so intense for me. Like when I came out of that sauna, I have obviously smashed my arm through the glass, but when I dragged myself across the floor, I had no skin on the top of my feet. My whole back was bruised, my hand was cut up. I was super, but for me, my process is extremely intense and extremely close to reality, as close as I can get to sort of pushing myself to the edge. And that was a moment where we see Billy starting to fight against this thing, but also the thing using him and manipulating him. And I think that was a really hard balance to strike in season 3. Was okay, well, no longer just a bully and we're trying to humanize this character. It's like the supernatural component that's at play and everything else, but how do I make you, the viewer, really believe in this moment? And I think just having a strong connection with Billy, as a character really helped in all moments, and every moment that is called back on. I religiously rewatch and rewatch and rewatch and rewatch. And every choice I make, I spend days going over the options that I'm going to present when I'm on set, whether it's 2 minutes of screen time or 200 minutes of screen time. I think it's, yeah, I don't know. I'm super OCD and I get really anxious about that stuff, and I care about it. So.
Yeah. Well, it's, the audience, even though it is a brief amount of screen time in season 4, the audience really connects with it because I think everyone really connected with Billy as a character and was drawn to him, even though
Mhm.
he's the bad guy, during his main season. But why is it that you think, what is it about like a more of a villainous character that draws people in? What draws you in?
I think as an actor, I'm drawn to villains because I think, or what we perceive to be the antagonist, or whatever you want to
Mhm.
call it, because there's this sort of truth in a weird, sick way in the mask. And what I mean by that is these antagonists or perceived antagonists are trying to cover up deep trauma, but so obviously that they wear this mask that's this outwardly facing, douchey, whatever you want to, whatever the archetypal, whatever characteristics of a villain is. um I I'm drawn to that because I'm interested in it. My mum's a psychologist, my grandfather's a psychologist, and I'm very interested in the human experience and what happens to us as children or in our early life that forms who we are and the masks that we put on. And I'm fascinated by villains because I want to humanize them. I want to get down to why they are the way they are, because they're not just bad for the sake of being bad. I'm interested in why, and it's incredibly complex and fascinating. I think that was always my thing with Billy, working with Matt and Ross, was he's not just bad. Like, why is he bad? Like, let's like what's the like everything that we came up with, his dad, his mom, all of the components in his life that make him the way he is, and why he wants to fight for what he wants to fight for, and what he's running from, and how that manifests in his behavior. And I'm fascinated by that in characters in general. And I'm scared as well because it frightens me, because I feel like I have to go into the people that lives that antagonized me, and I have to go into my own fears. And but there's catharsis in that. I think working with Billy, there was 3 or 4 years, however long I was involved with the show, of catharsis, of really going, hey, this is a high stakes supernatural thing that from the outside is just a big hit show, but people love it and people really connect to it. But for me, it's actually an emotional journey. It's something deep, and I hope that's why people connected with it. Is because
Yeah.
people can see, oh, okay, I see that we're all fundamentally flawed as human beings, and we try our best and we try to do the right thing, but it doesn't always work out. And we're all a product of our circumstances. And if we're trying to break out of our circumstances, we're just trying to do the best possible job that we can to be better or do better or something. And that's really the only reason I got into acting, was just sort of to confront a lot of my anxieties, and to really lean into the catharsis of, yeah, of using that as a force for escapism for people, to sort of sit in their room for a couple of hours and fall into these stories and find connection.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I know after the catharsis of this big hit show, you had said you consciously kind of took a pause on acting, but now you
Yeah.
have several projects in the works right now. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
what led to that pause? What did that time give to you?
I think a clearer understanding of where I want to be. I think, when season 3 came out, it was like, do this, do that. And I never got into this industry for notoriety or financial component or anything like that. So I've actually taken 4 years off. I worked 3 weeks on Elvis, and other than that, I did my first job just before coming here to New Zealand in 4 years. Um, and I've really just spent a lot of time working on my craft. Like I say, this film here in New Zealand, I spent 11 months working on a character, did nothing else, every day, every night. We only shoot this film for 5 weeks, but everything is in this moment, for me. And my co-star Vicky Creeps, who's here over here as well. It's a two-hander. She and I are so like intrinsically connected to this film and these characters in a real world way. So it's very emotional. And I think for me as well, just finding filmmakers that I really, really connect with and that I feel like I can learn from. And whatever anyone thinks, I think for me and my process and my sanity and finding the right reasons for doing this, it was the right thing to do to take 4 years off, and just focus on who I am and what I have to bring to my process as an actor and to projects and to other actors and directors. So it's been invaluable, it's been a really, really important and formative, even though I'm an adult, a formative period of time for me to discover who I am. And I'm so excited for the world to see this film that I'm doing now. Every piece of me is in it. I was just saying to someone before, I feel like Shelley Duvall in The Shining. We're up in the mountains here, and we have been, 2 weeks prep, 5 weeks shoot. Every day I lose myself completely in it. It's completely real. It's completely raw. It's completely me and my emotion. And, Vicky and I have a wonderful opportunity to play a third character. It's a three-hander told by two actors. So she and I play my mother, but just in spirit, in energy. And it's all about how abuse in our relationships lives and stays in our bodies, and how we take that into our lives. So I've really enjoyed it, and first time I've been back working. I shot a film for Daniel with Daniel Goldhaber, Faces of Death, with Barbie Ferreira, in New Orleans just before this. And again, I spent about 5 months working on that character and sending letters out to people to meet with, to do character development. And I'm very excited. I feel very focused. I was on the phone with my girlfriend 2 days ago, who's out of the country briefly, and I sort of said, like, I have never felt this connected to my craft and to who I am. And I don't mean that in whatever way that may come across, but I just feel so intensely focused and emotionally connected to these worlds and to these characters, and kind of feel like I'm becoming one with them in a weird way. So it's been very, very powerful, but also a great period of my life. And I'm so glad to have taken the time off to go and
Is
find
there, yeah, is there any sort of lesson, or experience from Stranger Things that you feel like you've really taken into this new focused era that's helped you?
Definitely. I think I've learned lessons in every chapter of my life. And I think for me, Stranger Things really taught me to spend time with a character, like having to work on Billy over multiple seasons. Really, I always thought that was going to be a long, drawn out process of continually working on a character whilst doing the production. But I think what I've learned after that and taking time off is that I'm happy to do one job every 2 years, but I want to spend a year and a half working on the character and then 6 months doing the job, rather than working on the character through the job. And that's really what I've aimed to do, is now go, okay, let's just do one or two projects every 2 years and just spend the entire time working on the character.
Well,
that's really all sorry. That's really
no,
all
no
I'm about
worries.
now.
That sounds like a great, fascinating process. We can't wait to see where it heads next, and what those great projects will be. But thank you, Dacre, so much for chatting Stranger Things with me.
Thanks, Sam.
Everyone who's watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby. Thanks, Dacre.